Well, hi, I'm Venus O'Hara, and I have been a sexfluencer since 2009. I left my job in luxury real estate, and I thought I'm going to start a sex blog, as you do. I had no plan, but immediately I started to write about sexuality, mainly BDSM back then. I've changed a lot since then. And then I started to write for Spanish media, and I became very prolific in Spanish media, in many magazines, El País. I wrote for El País, the biggest newspaper. And then I started to receive lots of sex toys to write about in my articles. And I thought I put two and two together and I made it into a business. And now that's my main business. So I've gone from I was starting reviews for shops here in Spain. And then I started doing things more with brands and in English, and I've gone global. And I'm also designing now. So I'm kind of sex toys are my specialty. Is it called Orion?
Orion, yes.
Oh yeah,
Orion.
I bought my very first sex toy there, so it's a special place in my heart. It was the icebreaker. I don't know if you know that. It's very old.
Yes, yes, yeah. This glass dildo, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, it's all about me. I'm just styling products. Thinking about new products with a team, not me alone, just with a team, and yeah, that's my job.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, next we have Rudolph Arnold. Let me see.
Just wanted
Oh, hello.
video. Okay, I dedicated my life.
Can't hear you very well.
Do you hear me now better?
Yes.
I dedicated my life being a teacher for math and physics, but I'm also a radio presenter, founder of a radio station, a cosplayer, a smart fashion designer, and experimental musician, a sex toy hacker, and kind of a civil scientist in sex research. Sounds really strange, but Thomas knows me, and I was 2 times I was member of, or I was participant, sorry for my bad English, at Fashion Hack Day. Little bit of strange story, and I'm connected with Nicole Prozzi. I don't know if you know her. She's a sex scientist in LA, and I built a scientific instrument for her. That's my background.
Oh, that's very interesting. It reminds me of the Ulysses of Masters of Sex. That's interesting. Okay, next.
Yes, I know Masters of Sex.
Oh yeah, but the the Ulysses, that's the kind of science meets.
Yes, I know also the scientific background, and I have a lot of experience with all scientific sex research.
Oh, fantastic! That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing. Next, Jeff Bennett.
Thank you. Yeah, Jeff Bennett, CEO and founder of Merari Medical. We're developing a wearable patch that's intended to delay an ejaculation in guys. Up to 30% of guys suffer from premature ejaculation, and there's another 40% that don't meet that clinical definition but want to extend the experience a little bit longer. So we're excited to be in the sexual health and wellness area. We don't consider ourselves a medical device, and we don't consider ourselves a toy. Not that there's anything wrong with toy, but we're kind of in this center area of more of a pleasure of product. So I'm curious to learn more about your experience and learn from others.
Fantastic, welcome. I think the pelvic floor trainers are kind of in that category as well, of like being sexual stroke medical, but neither one or the other.
Yeah, and it's, again, I'm curious to get others' feedback on it, but we're kind of in this area, and we want it to be something sold on retail shelves or online, and not necessarily sex toys stop or stores. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just from a positioning standpoint, we're trying to solve a true medical issue, but we want to have fun with it as well.
Fantastic. Okay, next, Alice Stewart. No. Okay, and then Priyal Agrawal.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Priyal and I'm the founder of Stanley Speak. And at Stanley Speak, we are building a 21st century sexual health ecosystem in India. And we provide three services. One is the education pillar, wherein we provide gamified, comprehensive sexuality education. The second one is products. So we provide access to menstrual hygiene, sexual wellness products online. And the third one is consultancy, which is a queer affirmative consultancy services where we connect audience to gynecologists, lawyers, counselors, and sexologists.
Oh, fantastic. Welcome. Thank you for sharing. Okay, next we have Emanuela Corti. Is she here? No. Okay, Randy. I saw that name earlier. Oh, Randy. Yeah, I can see you're here. I don't know how to pronounce the surname, but Jenner.
I'm trying to.
Because you can do a video. Okay, hello.
Hi. Hello. Good afternoon from New York City. So I'm a journalist. I freelance for Huffington Post. I also do stories for Pass Blue, which is a site that covers the United Nations. And then the other thing I was going to share is that I have a small startup here in New York City called In the Culture One World, and the idea is to produce linear mobile storytelling for your iPad, designed for the iPad and designed for the iPhone. And I'm glad to be here to hear what you're saying. I can only imagine the stories that you'll be able to tell. So thank you.
Oh, hopefully. Thank you for being here. And lastly, I don't think Emma Whitsense, I don't think I have that name on my list, or Emma Whitsense.
She emailed saying she couldn't possibly introduce herself, but she's going to take part in the event. She just can't talk right now.
Okay, no problem. Fantastic. Thanks for letting me know. So do you all have this presentation that I just showed a minute ago? I don't know if you can show me, or can Anish confirm that you've sent it? Yeah,
we
fantastic.
have added it in the chat for everyone too, so you can all look at it right now.
Okay, fantastic. So this is just a quick brief of what I've told you about me. That's the first one done. So I wanted to go over what my review process is, because a review is not just about, do I like the toy or not? I kind of have to take my own tastes out of it and just imagine what the toy is supposed to do and who it might suit. And there are many factors to take into consideration, such as I came up with this list in 2013. When I started reviewing, I was looking at some other review sites, and I thought, and also sex shops, and just to see what criteria were important for users. So I chose, for example, packaging, materials, shape, motors and noise level, usability, and I invented this word, orgasmobility, and the pros and cons, and ideal for, which is very important as well. And then I'm going to be presenting all of these categories and what they mean to me. Then I'll be talking about a case study of the world's best-selling sex toy, which is the Satisfyer Pro 2. And then we're going to talk about app-controlled sex toys, which has really made my job a lot harder, because now reviews take a lot longer. I have to look at many different things now. And also the rise of wearable sex toys. And I'm going to present I'm going to connect with someone and from Satisfy, and they're going to connect or control my toy for me. Okay. 1 second, can we add Andre back into the webinar, please? I got a message just now. Okay. Is that okay, Anish or Manan, please? Okay, I'm going to start now.
Yes, we're going to work on it. We're going to add him back in this. Okay,
thank you. Okay, so the first thing I look at is packaging, because when I started reviewing sex toys, the market was very different from what it is now. For example, back then there were lots of battery operated toys, and I still have a box of battery operated toys, and they would cost around maybe 20 to 30 or 50 euros. And then there were other brands who were going for the real kind of luxury packaging approach. And I guess the luxury packaging approach does kind of break down barriers, because there are many ways to break down barriers, and luxury is one of them, really, to make something look like a very luxurious product. Because sometimes when you go into a sex shop, or back then when you find a sex toy, there was kind of like very porn-like packaging, which I don't think many people would feel so comfortable buying. And also the sex toy shops have changed a lot as well. They're a lot brighter now and more approachable. So I think the packaging has kind of evolved with that. And so there are many different kind of approaches. So you can go for no frills, which is just the basic, or elegant. And another thing that I've noticed on some sex toys, well now, especially more recently, is that there are hygiene seals. And for example, some brands just put a sticker like here. And I've seen in shops that people remove that sticker and open the box and put it back on. So I think that's something to take into consideration, because sometimes I know from working with sex shops that sometimes sex toys are manipulated before they reach the customer, which is not a good thing. But what I do love about Satisfyer's packaging is they have this fantastic hygiene seal here, which is literally a piece of paper you have to rip off, so you know that no one has touched the toy before you have, which is really, really good. And another thing about packaging is sustainability. Obviously, plastic has become public enemy number one in the last few years, as you probably all know, from every different sector. And let me see if this is okay. He said he can't join now. Oops. Can someone get in touch with Andre and get him back in? Do I tell him to click on the same link?
Yes, he can just use the same link, and then we will accept him back into the meeting. Okay. Or we can email Anish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Then the contents of packaging. I've seen lots of different things in the industry. For example, there's always a charging cable, because as I told you, when I started, everything was battery operated, so we never got that. It was just a very basic blister pack in the pack, and there were there was nothing else, just maybe some instructions. And also another way to kind of keep the contents down is actually having the instructions actually on the box. Or I've seen some companies do a QR code as well, so that's an alternative. But I do find that a bit annoying as a user. It's just kind of like, you want to have all the information there. You don't want to be getting a phone and downloading it, but that depends on the person, I suppose. And also another thing which is important is also having a good user manual. I mean, you can have some instructions on the box, but it's nice to know different ways how to use a toy. For example, this toy here from Satisfyer called Candy Cane. It's a finger vibrator. It's a very unique shape. So I've never seen anything like that before. Hold on a sec, let me see. I'm sorry about this, but the message says participation is not possible. The host removed you from the meeting. Oops.
Then he should just email Anish, and then we can put him back inside in the group.
Maybe Venus, the best would be, I guess, if Andrea could somehow text me or like send me an email, so I can directly link him here, if possible.
Okay, can you tell me what your email address is now?
Yeah.
Anish. Was it Anish? Hold on.
Yeah, I can send in the chat area, and you can just.
I can't see the chat now. Okay. Is it Anish at?
wearit/berlin.com.
Okay. Okay, so carrying on. So this is when a lot of users who haven't tried 700 toys, they might get a toy and they don't really know what to do with it. But that's part of my job to kind of explain different ways to use a toy. But also it's kind of cool to have some illustrations here so people can kind of get the idea of what to do with things. Because with sex toys, I think that it's not always so obvious how to use them. So that's something to take into consideration. And also people don't really like photos. So it's kind of good to have kind of like linear drawings or something very basic, or just using a picture of or an outline of the actual genitalia or the part of the body that it's supposed to stimulate. And let me see what else. Okay. Another thing that's important is safety information. I think, well, this is between you and I. I'm not going to go into detail, but in the past, I've had to go to the emergency room 3 times in my life because of sex toys, and it wasn't a good experience, I can tell you. I do think that the industry does need to improve safety standards, because I know that there are a lot of companies, or it's just like a disclaimer saying sold as a novelty only. So I think it's really important to use safe materials and have the right disclaimers and instructions, so people aren't going to do things they're not supposed to do with toys, or that there's no risk at all. And that's really, really, really important. Another thing that people might include in packaging is a warranty card, which is maybe that's kind of with more expensive sex toys. And what else? And then sometimes a sachet of lubricant can be quite helpful, because not everyone knows that not every type of lubricant can be used with sex toys. For example, with silicone, it has to be water-based. So that's very important to outline. And also people want to know how to clean sex toys. People don't really know how to do that, because not all sex toys are waterproof. You might be able to just run water over it, but I think that there should be some more emphasis on that, because people ask me that all the time. They don't really know how to clean it. And it's so important to clean a sex toy before and after, not just after, because you don't know how many hands have touched it before you. And also if it's been lying around, then it can also gather dust and germs and dirt, etc. And then what else? Guarantee information, lubricant, storage pouch. That's something that some brands use. I find it's very useful to have a storage pouch, because if you're taking your toy away with you, then it's kind of good to have, especially with some air pulse toys. You don't want to have things getting inside that nozzle. So I think it's very, people like to have a storage pouch, because not everyone is keeping the boxes like me. I'm always keeping the boxes. That's because someone in an erotic museum in Barcelona told me that that it would be worth more in the future, because I have the intention of having my collection doing world tours, because it's going to be very, very valuable. I hope one day. It's kind of valuable right now, but as we know how much mobile phones have changed over the years, imagine sex toys. They've changed so much. So that's going to be quite a good collection to educate the future generations about sex toys in the past, in the future. So that's something I do personally. But not everyone wants to have big boxes around. They want to have, oops, no. So anyway, okay. And
I think we have a question from Jeff, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Jeff, you have a question?
Yeah, so I wanted to follow up on your comment regarding safety of the different materials. And to your knowledge, is there any regulatory body out there that's kind of looking after these toys in terms of the materials, the electronics being used, to certify that they're safe versus just a novelty label on them?
From my knowledge, no. And I think if there was, that would make everything a lot slower and more expensive. So that's something that sex toy reviewers are always complaining about, because I think, but that's something that you have to look into, what other companies are doing, what they do, or what they include in their disclaimers. It's very difficult to attribute something back to a sex toy if there are issues, because there are issues. If you ask anyone who's working in an ER room, they know there's always toys getting stuck in places or whatever. But in terms of materials, that's the next section here. Materials have evolved a lot over the years. For example, I have an example here. This is a rabbit vibrator from when I started my career as a sex toy reviewer. And sometimes I go back into my boxes and because they are all classified according to the category, let's say G-spot, clitoral. But in my battery drawer, which is probably the oldest ones with the cheapest materials, some toys have started to disintegrate. I'm going to show you now a rabbit vibrator that I haven't done anything to, but look what's happened to it. This was absolutely clear, and look at it now. And
wow.
and some, it's really crazy. You think, what are people putting inside their bodies? You know, for me now, after my experiences in ER rooms and with dodgy materials, I always use a condom with anything that's insertable, even with pelvic floor trainers. So that's something that I do personally. I don't really take any company's word for it. I just actually prefer to protect myself that way. And sometimes in the past as well, I've actually used condoms with an external toy just to kind of keep, I know it's a new, fresh surface, a clean surface every time. So that's something, isn't that crazy? I hadn't done that before, but imagine, wow.
Yeah, so my background, I come from a medical device background, and we're probably on the extreme of, all the safety tests. But in your opinion, should there be some baseline testing that should be done from a biocompatibility, toxicity standpoint, some sort of, I wouldn't call it regulatory, but some sort of standards that these toys need to meet before people start inserting them in their bodies? Because going to the ER can't be pleasant.
Well, I don't think it can be, materials can be one aspect, and then people are doing things they shouldn't be doing with toys, which is another aspect of another factor to take into consideration. But for example, these days, people are using body safe silicone, medical grade silicone. So that seems to be the industry standard right now. But I don't know as an individual if putting colors in that is making it somehow toxic. And also people say that the more flexible something is, that smell of like new car smell, that's something that's not supposed to be very good for the body, I don't think. So I think go for the type of, materials that would be used as implants, like silicone or something that's medical grade would be the best way. Because I think there's also a food grade silicone as well, from my understanding. Another thing about safety that's really important is there are some articles that I've read in the press about butt plugs getting stuck in someone's stomach. I mean, it's really crazy because anything that's anal should be labeled as so, or if it's not anal, it should be, if it's something insertable for the vagina, it should be labeled like not suitable for anal stimulation, because an anal toy needs to have a big, wide, flared base. And from what I can see, these flared bases are not as big as they should be. And I'll send a couple of links here in this chat when I'm doing the Q&A or something, from a couple of articles where someone has put a butt plug inside them. These butt plugs that have, let's say, a jewel on the end, on the flared base, to kind of make it look aesthetic on the anus. However, that's not wide enough, really. And there was this particular story that was in the British press where a couple were playing around with this butt plug, and then they were like, hang on, where is it? Where is it? And they were looking for it everywhere. Then she lay on her stomach and it was like vibrating inside her. So she had to go to emergency room, and that was that. And it was also, I think it was a metal toy, so you don't want to be, that's quite scary. So anyway, that takes me on to my next point, which is materials. Because the problem with these jelly toys, it wasn't just the fact that we can see it's disintegrating now, but they were porous. So that means you can never really clean them. And there are also some other materials that are slightly porous as well. And so that's why medical grade silicone is a good one, because it's non-porous. Other materials that people are using, glass. I find, I don't know, I don't feel very comfortable using something that's got glass inside me. I just don't think if it breaks or something, even though it's not supposed to break, you just think it could be absolutely terrible. And also porcelain. I've seen some porcelain dildos, some that are kind of hollow inside that can be filled with, let's say, warm or cold water to kind of indulge in temperature play. But all of these, they were really beautiful. I used to have all these dildos on display in my old apartment, And some of them just fell down to the floor and smashed into smithereens. So you think, oh my God, imagine if something like that happened inside me. It could be terrible. But the good part about porcelain or glass is that they are also non-porous. They do feel quite nice. And there are also some brands that are doing wood, and they say there's no splinters, but I do know a sex toy reviewer who's reviewed more toys than me. I think she might have reviewed 2,000. So that's like something for me to aim for. But she's also had issues with splinters with wood toys. So that's something to take into consideration. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's safe. And another thing, waterproof. Not all toys are waterproof, but if you can make it waterproof, it's better, because that does make cleaning a lot easier, because sometimes things are splash proof, so you can put it under running water, but you can never really get it totally clean. And I think it's always a good idea to, if you're a sex toy brand, to kind of have your own cleaner as well, that's adapted to the materials that you use. Because I mean, I've got a couple of sex toy cleaners, but I use different cleaners or different cleaners on different brands. You don't really know if it's appropriate or not, but it's kind of good. And also with this COVID, extra emphasis on hygiene, you can never be too clean. But then you think about all the things that will be in the cleaner. Is that going to be good for your body if you don't rinse it properly? So for me, I just stay safe and go for condoms. And have you got any questions about materials, anyone?
I believe Randy has one. Maybe Randy, if you want to jump in.
So outside of a regulatory body, right? Outside of that, like set that aside. Are there any researchers that sort of gather information on what materials have been known to be like good or not good for these sort of toys, or if not that, is there another sort of governing body or something like that that suggests, well, that has, for the packaging that gives pointers as like, that sort of like just looks at what is being advertised and not being advertised in terms of the packaging, and gives some sort of guidance as to what's good or what historically been good to use and not good.
Well, all I know about that is that when someone's tried to send me lubricants, they can't, because there's some different kind of laws or something in terms of importing from outside the EU. And anything that says, I have to say it's not medical use as well, because I mean, when something is a medical device, then it's a lot more difficult to send it to an individual. So there are some different laws there, but I think the sex toys would become under a category which would be personal massagers in that sense. And also I think it's just worth looking at packaging and just seeing what other companies have there as disclaimers, because they all have the same kind of sold as a novelty only, and the kind of European Union symbol. So they're all different things there. So that's something to look into, I think. There's also a blogger who's really kind of analyzed a lot of sex toys, and who's kind of like, she's very interesting. She's called Dangerous Lily. I think she's American, but look her up, because she does very detailed analysis of materials, and people even send her their toys and she analyzes them, and she'll like take a lighter up to some toys and just see if they're doing what they're supposed to do according to the description, because maybe not everyone's going to test and see if it's true or not, And also the different types of standards of glass as well. I don't know.
Dangerous Lily.
Yeah, with 2 L's. Okay, so Andre's still trying to get in. Is there a...
We are trying our best to get him back. It's a technical issue, but we're working on it.
So yeah, you have to think about that as well, because sometimes I've used sex toys that are like, let's say, this is not an example, let's say it's a lay-on toy like this on my clitoris, and the button has been here, so you have to remove the toy every time and to change it and go back. So that's something to take into consideration. You need to have have the buttons that are near your fingers at least, but not in a place that you can accidentally switch off. So that can be complicated or not, depending on how big the toy is. And I always prefer buttons that you can kind of feel, so that when you're in the dark, you know where the button is. So that it could be a hollow button, like a dented button, or it could be a kind of bubble. But ones that you're kind of looking for are really annoying sometimes. And also you can go for different things, like having buttons for increase, decrease, and power, or you can just go for one simple button and just have, which it's quite standard now to have 1 or 2 seconds to switch on or off, and then short presses to go through different settings. That's what most sex toys do have. When they don't have that, it's kind of like, what is this? Because I've obviously tried so many that do the same thing. Let me just see. Sorry about this with the Andre. Let's see. Okay, so next position. Oh yeah, that's another important thing about safety, is the position of charging points, because we're not supposed to have these charging points that are kind of metallic. I'm not sure about the what the metal is exactly, but you shouldn't have that metallic part on a place that stimulates the body. That's very important. And what else? Yeah, and also, yeah, ergonomic to hold and stimulate. Okay, I think I've talked about all of those in the shape. Any questions about shape? No? Okay.
No, I don't see any question. I think you can go further.
Okay, great. Okay, next thing, usability. So I've written here, charge time versus operating time. I have come across sex toys that take 3-4 hours to charge, and it gives you 1 hour of operating time. That's so annoying, because I mean, 3-4 hours is a very, very long time to be charging a toy. So, and I've also encountered the opposite of, for example, toys that you charge for 1 hour and then they give you maybe 2 hours of pleasure. And that's the kind of really a great scenario to be in. Because I mean, most people, everyone takes a different amount of time to have an orgasm, but I think I mean, a normal session might be about 15-20 minutes, or maybe that might be a long time, but I think it's important to maybe get 2 or 3 orgasms out of each battery use before you have to be charging it again. Otherwise it feels like you're always charging a toy. So that's something to think about. And also to switch things on, you don't want a button that can be, well, that's quite easy to switch on, because sometimes I've encountered some buttons that maybe that aren't the kind of standard 2 seconds on and 2 seconds off. That can be very, very confusing. And having lights as well can be quite a good thing to do. For example, to have an indicator so people know how much battery is left. That's quite a nice thing that's quite user friendly as well. And then remote controls. I mean, it's great to have toys which have remote controls. I mean, I'm going to be showing you this one later, which is, oh, where is it? This toy here, which is called Little Secret from Satisfyer, and it's an app-controlled wearable, but it also has a remote control, because not everyone wants to get their mobile out and download an app, etc. So it's nice to have the option of having a remote control and just just go from there and press and go, as I call it. So some people prefer that, but it's very important to have these things that are very easy to pair and very yeah, intuitive. Any question here? Should a shape follow a function, or a function should follow a shape? Interesting. Well, I think it depends on what the function is, of course. And also there's different types of stimulation for the clitoris. There's direct stimulation, which would be more pointy, and there's indirect, which would be something like a wand massage, which is stimulating a wider surface. So I think there's you can really play around with that. But what's really important is, in my experience, or that the motor is where the point of stimulation is, because it's very annoying sometimes. In the past, I've used sex toys that the motor is closer to the handle, and it's like, and your hand's going like this, and that's probably not good for repetitive strain injury. And then it's not so strong on the actual clitoris, so that can be quite annoying as well. So any questions about usability? And also about the shape, I think it's really important to take into consideration the anatomy. I think that's really, really important. And one thing I would really, hang on, sorry. Okay, so he's in contact with Anish and Andre. One thing I would really recommend to anyone is to actually, is to get a proper, if it's for female sex toys or devices, it is to get a gynecologist, what's the word? You know, these kind of dummies or that people use that in the medical profession for training. You can, for example, gynecologists use them for training how to do pap smears. So you can actually buy these kind of pelvises that have the real dimensions of the vagina and the length of the vagina, etc. And I think that's a really good idea, because in a lot of companies that you can see that they haven't taken anatomy into consideration. I think it's very, very, very important. But what you're not going to find on these mannequins is the clitoris, because that kind of is not really there as a medical thing. But it's important to know that the clitoris is usually it could be between 1.5 centimeters and 4.5 centimeters away from the vaginal opening. So the average will be about 3. So that's something to take into consideration as well, the distance between the clitoris and the vagina in the case of a dual stimulation toy. Yeah, and also travel locks are kind of cool, because obviously, hopefully we'll be traveling a lot more soon. And I think a lot of people have had that experience of a toy switching on by accident, and it's not cool in the airport when that happens, and then they open up everything in your bag. But it's very important that they are easy to operate, because I've had situations where I've received a new sex toy and it's not been clear to me that there's actually a travel lock activated, and I'm thinking, this toy doesn't work, you know, and then it's not really, it should be very obvious that there's a travel lock in place. Any questions about usability? Can you speak about usability of Lovance and similar app devices? Okay, I'm actually going to talk about apps coming up in the next a bit later on. So I'll come back to that question. And then the next thing in the review template that I created was orgasmobility, and does it give sheep gripping orgasms? Obviously, that can be a very subjective thing, but I also would ask, does it have to be orgasmic? And that's how sex tech is really changing now, especially in the case of wearable tech. It's not about orgasms. It's about kind of the tease and the foreplay, and also with all the app stuff that we'll talk about in a while. It's not about just kind of like putting it in the place and going, having an orgasm. It's about listening to music and enjoying different vibrations. And so I think the way we use sex toys is definitely changing. Let me see this question. Is the travel lock useless? I don't think it's useless. I think sometimes also you just don't want it to be vibrating randomly, or I think it's a good thing to have as a plus, and hopefully we'll be traveling a lot more, and people are more inclined to take a toy with a travel lock with them, I would say, if they are traveling. Or you just kind of let it go to the end of the battery. That would be another option. I don't think it's useless, but to be honest, I don't really use them that much, but I do think they can be useful. Okay, I want to talk to you now about a case study of the Satisfyer Pro 2, which is the world's best-selling sex toy. And I wanted to explain a bit from my perspective as a user how it's had so much success. And it said it's the world's most sold and reviewed sexual wellness toy, and it's sold over 25 million in the last few years. And on Amazon, it's got 100,000 reviews in the US and Europe together. It was launched in 2016. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how that has changed. Well, back then, I used to have a lot more, let's say, battery operated toys, and there were some luxury toys that were luxury brands that were kind of going for that kind of very nice box and rechargeable toys. But I did find back then, there's a little bit of a sidetrack, that those rechargeable toys back then were not as strong as the battery operated ones. So I tended to prefer the battery operated ones, but now there's no way you could justify battery operated toys. So then when this came along, the Satisfyer Pro 2, it kind of has quite basic packaging. It's obviously improved a lot now, and it's rechargeable with a very decent price. So that's what really made it so successful. This is the first one actually, it has changed since then. It's a lot quieter, but the shape was the same. And that's really important because this shape has got such a nice head, which people really, really love. And so this has really ticked a lot of boxes of my criteria before. The packaging is not luxurious, but it's kind of functional, and it's kind of showing you how much do you want to pay for packaging, really? Because in the past, having all these bells and whistles are not going to give better orgasms. It might be better for a gift maybe, but this has really grown from word of mouth, and now this is the current Pro 2 with different packaging, and also it's a different toy inside. It's kind of matte rose gold. And also now, it's actually become known as the Satisfyer, even though Satisfyer have about 200 products or something. So this has it's had a real kind of word of mouth success. It's kind of like similar to oral sex simulator. So it's kind of like very interesting that it's a word of mouth kind of success. And it definitely does tick all the boxes. And what else am I going to tell you about that? Yeah, so that was the great game changer, really, seeing how a toy didn't have, had quite normal packaging, and it was way more effective than these more expensive toys. So that's what I think the real success of this toy is. And I didn't try it for a couple of years, and then I came back to it recently to do some more testing. And it was like, oh my God, I've tried all the AirPods toys of different brands and also different ones from Satisfyer, but this is really definitely something special. Any questions about that? Hang on a sec. Let's see. Is it important to have a lot of vibration settings, and do many buttons affect usability? Well, in terms of vibration settings, many sex toy reviewers or people who've tested a lot of toys will tell you that the only ones that are important are the continuous ones. Because if you want to have an orgasm, you want to have a continuous vibration. Zzz. But if you're going for these ones, zzz, zzz, that's so annoying. That can be very, very, very annoying. And you might go through all like zzz, 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 pulsations like that, or even waves. Zzz, zzz. That can feel quite nice if you are just kind of getting to know the toy at the beginning of stimulation. But when you go to orgasm, you want to go for that kind of more continuous setting. So when people say 15 settings, you're not thinking, oh my God, 15 settings. However, now that things have changed a lot and people are not just going for orgasm, I think these teasing settings are a lot more interesting for kind of wearable tech. Another thing that's really important is that if you have two different motors, it's nice to have them as being independently, that you can control them independently. I think that's really, really important. And sometimes, or if it's just one button, that sometimes they are doing different things, because that really does feel nice. Let's say if it's internal and external, it'll be like zzz, 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 or like waves that are doing the opposite. That can feel really, really nice. So I think the standard in the industry would be maybe 6 or 7 settings minimum, and then going up to about 15. But any more than that, you're kind of getting lost. But what some companies do is actually get a LED light on the toy, so you can kind of know which color is your favorite and go back to that color, so you don't have to remember if it was number 6 or number 7 kind of thing. So there's that can be quite interesting. And many buttons. Some things are getting a lot of buttons these days. For example, toys that have a warming function, which is something that's come into play in the last few years. And obviously warming, anything that's kind of going to warm up a little bit, does kind of help the blood flow and will help you get aroused quicker. Obviously it's quite hot here at the moment, but I remember trying warming toys in the winter underneath a very nice blanket, and it does feel very, very, very nice. But that's something I personally I would worry about in terms of the safety. I think, is it going to catch fire? But I know that in some cases they do have a kind of automatic off when they reach a certain temperature. I'm not sure who's checked that. So that's something that could end up in the press one day. And so yeah, so when things have let's say a warming button, that's usually an extra button. But then I would say the less the better. For example, if you go for anything external, or it depends, if you've got 2 motors, then definitely one button for each motor. Or if it's just one motor, one button, and then having the kind of 2-second on off, and then the short press to go through the different settings. And then, did you test the womanizer too? Is there a big difference? I've tested all the womanizers, all the satisfiers. I know there's an internal difference. For me, I don't really notice that difference. I notice the difference in, for example, the shape of the nozzle. That's something that really varies for me. And yeah, that's something that's very important, that the shape of the nozzle and the width, and if it's a pointy edge or not. So that's something that makes more of a difference to me. And also another thing that makes a difference is how deep the nozzle is, because if it's shallow, it can be quite painful, or if it's very narrow, it can be quite painful, such as there's some that are quite narrow and it's like, but also that's very personal and depends on what your clitoris is like. Some people prefer, that's why it can be sometimes good to have an option to actually have different nozzles to suit different people, because some people will want a more pinpoint and some people might want a wider surface area on that. So for me, no, I don't really notice that much difference, to be honest. It's just more of a kind of the shape of the nozzle, which makes more of a difference to me. Okay. Any more questions about that? Where's okay. So now I'm going to talk about app control toys. So I've tested lots of app controlled toys, probably all of the apps, the main apps on the market right now, and that does make my job a bit more complicated, because now I have to test things several times to actually get the gist of them. So I can see some things that what's really, really important, first of all, is the connection, that it's very easy to connect the toy with your device. That's really important. It sounds simple, but sometimes it can be quite difficult. Or if you're using a toy, then the apps stops. It's not paired anymore, and you're like, it can be very frustrating, especially if you're with a partner and you're enjoying an intimate moment. So that's very, very important. I think it's very important as well to be intuitive, because I've tested so many apps, and sometimes I'm trying to navigate around some apps and they just don't seem very intuitive, even to me, with someone who's had a lot of experience. And of course, privacy. This is very, very important. There have been lots of scandals about this, and someone sent me an article in a tech website. They were going around Berlin, I think, and they were seeing where all these butt plugs were on a map. I mean, it's a really scary thing to think about. I don't care personally, because I'm a sex toy reviewer, but maybe I don't want people to know that I've got all these devices. But I mean, a lot of people who are more concerned about privacy might not want their neighbor to kind of connect to their Bluetooth, etc. So it's very, very, very important, the privacy aspect. And someone was going to ask me about love ends earlier. Love ends, similar app control devices. Caution about overuse. What do you mean about overuse? That could be something that has different meanings in terms of sex toys, I think. If it's about privacy, yes, I think privacy is a real major concern. That's why the Satisfier app is something I really, really do love. That's taken that into consideration. You don't even need to have an email to actually use it. And yeah, so with apps, you can actually create your own patterns, which I think is a kind of, I mean, I don't really think about creating my own patterns exactly, because I just want to go continuous most of the time. However, if you are interacting with another person in the same room or at a distance, then you do want to have a bit more variation, because otherwise it's kind of a bit boring if you are using it to tease. And then another thing, ambient sound, which is a comment that is, or a feature that is becoming more apparent in sex toys. That can be a lot of fun if you are in a noisy space, or for example, if you are indulging in tickling or something like that. So the person who's laughing, getting tickled, their laugh could provoke the vibrations or whatever, or even roadworks, because everyone hates roadworks or kind of refurbishments going on. That could be a good way, or the TV or something like that. And also the music thing has become quite popular. But as I said, I think that's something that's kind of more of a kind of play tease thing. And then live control would be the most common use of solo app-controlled sex toys. So you can actually just draw on the screen what you want the toy to do, and if you want it to loop and repeat. And also now there's a new feature on many apps that you can actually create sequences. For example, you can start off slow, have some different variation, and then you can go higher up to when you approach orgasm, or you could do edging sequences where you could kind of have several peaks and reach maximum vibration and go down again, and then make it last longer. And then of course, remote connection, which is obviously the most exciting part of app-controlled toys in my opinion. Another thing that I find really, well, I used to think that kind of the app-controlled toy or the app-controlled toys, the most interesting aspect of it would be to connect with a partner long distance. And then if I was using it on my own, I would just kind of use it manually, just press and go. But now I have different opinions now that I've used many toys that have, let's say, 2 motors. It's kind of nice to create different functions or different patterns for each motor so that they're both doing different things, settings that don't exist on the preset ones that are on the manual, in the manual use. So any questions about that, about app control toys, app control usage? And maybe Randy, if you want to clarify what you mean about overuse, or caution about overuse, what you meant there. What about feedback signals? I don't exactly know what that means. Do you want to explain?
Maybe Rudolph, you can come live,
yes,
so you can explain.
Yes. Okay, I think about biosignals to register the orgasmic or sexual arousal feelings. Are there any sex toys who provide this?
I can't really hear you.
Sex toys who provide this biofeedback thing. Okay, let's discuss it later. Carry on.
Okay, because what I have tried once is I had tried a watch once that would detect your orgasm, or it would tell you, it would kind of see how much you were moving, and it was quite interesting to see.
The only thing I know is the lioness.
Yes, I haven't actually tried that.
A kind of a thing, but it's only for the person itself and not for a remote partner.
Yeah, so you don't know if it's a real orgasm or not. Yeah, but I did try something that was actually a watch that, you know, these kind of watches that control or just kind of can monitor your sleep or your fitness, etc. They had a mode that was called love mode. So at the beginning of, let's say, masturbation or sex, you would just put it on love mode, and then at the end you would say love mode off, and then at the end it would produce this graph, and it would just be basically showing you how much you moved. And obviously in masturbation you'd probably be still most of the time, and then the actual orgasm you'd be moving a bit more. So it was really interesting because at the end it would show you what kind of animal you were. Let's say if it's very fast, then you'd be a rabbit, and if it was slow you'd be an armadillo or something like that. So it was quite interesting. That's the only kind of biofeedback thing that I've actually used. And also I have done a lot of I've tried a couple of pelvic floor devices that are really cool, like let's say video games, and you're squeezing those pelvic floor muscles to actually make a ball go up a screen. And that's kind of really cool because I think people like graphs and just to see in data and stuff about themselves. Okay, and let's see, Randy, well, I just meant a cautionary manual or instruction that offers best practices for app-controlled devices. Yes, I think that is not taken into consideration as much as it should be in general about privacy, etc. I think privacy would be the main concern on app control devices. That's what my feeling is. And how do you see the idea of combining wearable vibrators and Tinder? Well, that's already existing actually. I think you can, on the Satisfy app, you can connect with strangers. So that's kind of a fun idea, getting a stranger to control your toy. I'm not sure it's people are using it that much recently, but there was a product a few years ago called, I can't remember what it was called now. It was called Miss something. Anyway, it was a set of Kegel balls, and it also had this kind of Tinder thing, so you could actually connect with someone to actually get squeezing your pelvic floor muscles. That was kind of an interesting concept of, you know, doing your pelvic floor workout and having someone else kind of control it for you. Let's say the balls would vibrate and you're supposed to squeeze at that time, but there weren't enough users to actually make it functional. But it was a really interesting idea, definitely. But I do think this is coming in the future, and also this has happened a lot in the last year with the pandemic, that people are actually connecting with sex toys and having cyber sex and sexting, etc., through the app and without actually meeting. So that's something that's definitely taken off in the last year, and that's probably one of the reasons why our industry is doing so well. So I definitely think also for kind of people who are just meeting on Tinder and then they're just kind of connecting in a kind of remote sex toy way before actually meeting in person. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to do any more questions about apps.
I think there's one that went through the chat from Jeff. Are the apps collecting any data on the overall experience? If so, how is privacy maintained?
That's a very good question. Does Andre want to step in and answer that? Because you know more about that. Do you know about that? This is the app expert in Satisfiers. They've created an app that really is taking privacy into consideration more than anyone else. So let me, Andre.
Yeah, I think privacy goes first. Definitely, you're right, and you are not allowed to collect anything which would be personally identifiable data, and of course, we are very, very cautious about that. It is true that the topic is still very sensitive to most of us, although we are using Google and Facebook and plenty other tools which are not as cautious about the amount of data they are collecting. But when it comes to sex toys, privacy first.
Okay, fantastic. And also I've noticed on the Satisfy app that when you want to connect to a different device, you have to actually delete it from the app and from your phone settings as well. For example, you can also control this with the Apple Watch. You have to delete first in the phone before going to a different device.
Yes.
That's part of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, one of the aspects here is privacy, and that nobody can take over your device once you have connected it to your smartphone. On the other hand, of course, it comes at the cost of user experience, because if it is a couple who are using a device together, then they are limited to one phone at a time. So there are pluses and minuses here, and still it is good to give the user this decision how they want to proceed with how they want to connect them, to make them very aware of the issues as well, not to scare them, but give them all the choices to take themselves.
Okay, great. Another feature about the Satisfy app is you can control up to 4 devices. So now that there's lots of polyamorous couples, that's a kind of a new way. So it's incredible how these things are changing as couples are changing as well. Okay, we're going to do a quick demo here. Let's connect. I'm going to let Andre control my device so we can do a quick demo. I must confess that this is the aspect of sex toy testing that I've done the least, to be honest, the remote. Well, let's see.
While you are connecting, I should say that we are partners on Satisfyer. we are in the list of friends of each other, and that is why we can have this remote session. It's not supposed that everyone can contact people without their consent. So we already accepted the friendly invitations of each other.
Okay, let me get this. So forget this device. So I'm actually disconnecting it now. And then let's get it open. So 4 seconds. So Bluetooth pairing request, would like to connect to your phone, pair. And one thing I do love about the app as well is that you know how much battery you've got left, because that's something that in the manual use, it's quite annoying. But with manual toys, you can also do the thing with the light that can light up. Maybe let's say when you switch it on, it can flash a certain number of times and you know how much battery is left. Okay, so let's go to play. So we're in a chat now because we connected earlier. So we're already friends on this app. Now I have my toy connected. So what we're doing now is we'd have to actually initiate a call. Is that correct? We can only do it through a call. Yeah. So I'm going to call. You call. Okay, so we are now connected. And now I'm gonna press this little button up here, and I can choose from give up controls, that'd be giving it away, or we could swap control or sync. So I'm gonna give up control. Sync would be if he has a device and I have a device, and we can make them do the same thing at the same time, which is quite a great way to connect, really. We actually have to have the, oops, oh yeah. Wow. And also at the bottom, we can actually end the control. Are you saying something? I can't hear you.
I was saying now I can change the intensity, invent some funny pattern, how I want it to vibrate, and set it in eternal loop.
Eternal loop. That's funny. But I think that, yeah, what I think is really cool about this is actually, if you had a toy as well and they were kind of controlling each other, and also you'd be kind of looking, you could do a video chat as well. So we actually are connected without seeing each other at the moment. Yeah. Okay, let's do end control. Let's imagine the phone rings, which is another thing, which can be quite annoying. That's really important as well, that sex toys kind of switch off quickly because you can have interruptions. And then also, what else can we do? Can you ask me for permission as well? So we've got new request, accept or decline. And here I would see the name of the person all the time. Yeah. So
now you're controlling my little plug.
Okay. So we've got internal and external, which is kind of cool. So you can actually
it's 2 motors.
Yeah, so you can play around with 2 sides of the screen here. And then you could actually press pause to make them to do even more, make them tease them even more. And also, I like the thing that you can loop as well. You don't have to constantly have your finger on the screen. So that's good. Okay, so let's stop that.
Very strong, this motor.
Oh yeah?
Can't hold it.
That's always good. Okay, let's end that. Okay, so that's the demonstration. Any questions about anything that I've spoken about, or app control toys or wearables?
Thank you, Venus, for that. For the next part, I would like the audience to come up, maybe turn on your camera so we can make this a little bit more interactive. Ask any questions you might have before we end the session. Anyone would like to come?
I was going to ask if you could, when you're discussing where we are now and then the near future of where wearables are there any areas where you think the business, the industry needs to address more, or any areas where you think it should be headed to, in your view?
I think,
just as an industry, the businesses.
I think it's going in the right direction. I think it's good to maybe take into consideration people who might have disabilities as well, because I know that some people who maybe can't control the toys, so having things that can be used hands-free can be very useful. And also maybe voice control, that would be a good thing to do, rather than pressing buttons, etc. Maybe just having a vocal command, that would be good. And maybe you could set up them so it could be customized to different languages, etc., to actually create that when you have a new toy. I actually wrote an article a few years ago about the future of sex toys. It was a kind of like I wrote it for a Spanish newspaper, and I talked about me in the future. I'd be in my country mansion, and I would be opening the window because a drone would be coming with my new sex toys. And I kind of invented about 8 different toys of the future, and they were kind of a bit weird. One was a kind of toy where, like plasticine, you could kind of keep molding it into different shapes. And there was one like that a few years ago. I can't remember, it was a dildo, but you could make different shapes, but mine broke after one time. You think, oh my God, I'm not sure if that material is very good for internal use. Another one was something called Octogasm, which was basically like a penis ring with 8 different pieces coming off to stimulate different parts of the body, which might get in the way, but I just thought it was a crazy idea. So we're kind of getting closer to that time now. It seemed funny back then, but we'll be getting drones soon from Amazon with sex toy deliveries, I think.
Hey, Venus, this is Jeff. I admire your openness and comfort with what you're talking about. I mean, it's just awesome to see someone just comfortable in their own skin and able to talk about this freely. That's really helpful. In terms of toys, I mean, you talked a lot about the vibrators that are more of probably a mechanical type of a toy, but do you have any experience with stimulation-based tools or toys that deliver electrical energy?
I was given an electro-stim toy to experiment with, but I just didn't like the sensation personally. I found it, my body just said no. I just wasn't convinced. And I've been to the Aerofame fair many times in the past, and I have seen all those electro-stim products and I felt them on my fingers, and I just thought, it just felt like, it was an electric shock almost. It just didn't feel good to me personally, but some people like that. There's all different strokes for different folks, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so much. I mean, we're working on a stimulation base, and there's so much different variation in the waveforms, energy, amplitude that you can do to make it not feel as shocking. But I'm not aware of a lot of toys out there that use stimulation. So, thought I'd ask the expert.
Yeah, I don't think they've become mainstream yet, but there are definitely some products out there. So I think people might be a little bit afraid of them still, maybe, or maybe there's not enough knowledge about them. But also, from what I was saying before about safety, I would even be a bit apprehensive about using them, because I know that the safety standards are kind of pretty much non-existent. So I just don't want to be the first person that has a terrible experience from it, Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any more questions?
Does anyone else have any more questions?
Yes, how can I find a partner? Because I have a totally scientific and experimental music approach, and I'm not into business. How can I find a partner?
For music, you say?
Yes, no, for this toy, for my system. My system is Play Me. One moment, I post a link that you can read it. It's a research article in a scientific journal, and I'm looking for a partner to bring this to the market.
Well, I think a good place to look.
I don't know how I can find somebody, because at the beginning I told you I'm a teacher, I'm a radio presenter, but I'm not into business.
So what does it do exactly?
No, I want, do you have any advices or somebody who is in this audience? How can I manage to find a partner?
But what does it do? Is it a product you've designed?
Yes.
Mm.
It's,
Well, in that
it's
case,
a scientific system. It's a system. It's a little bit difficult to explain.
Is it a device?
It's called Play Me. It's a system. There's a vibrator, some sensors, and so on, and it works with music as a kind of feedback.
Okay, so I know there are some.
Okay, maybe it's another thing. Maybe the audience can read the link, and maybe someone of the audience will contact me.
Okay, well, good.
Okay, I'll end this. It's in the chat. The link is in the chat.
Okay, we'll check it out. But also, I would check out the fair Aerofame. That's the biggest sex toy fair in the world, which is in Hanover in November. So that's a good place to find all the brands. And also, they're on their website. They've got contacts for all the brands there. So that's probably the hub of the sex toy industry, I would say, definitely. Any more questions?
It doesn't seem like it. Maybe we can give Venus a round of applause for your first masterclass. Thank you very much. That was great. We learned a lot. I want to thank everyone for taking part. Yeah, let's do it like this. Thank you. That was great. Feel free to connect with each other. I don't know. That could be an option. I know Anish has been posting links in the chat right now, so maybe you all want to have a look.
Someone asked me now about what's the most innovative toy, in my opinion. Well, that's interesting because imagine after all the tests I have performed, you might think I become bored, and sometimes I do, but it's so nice to actually see new developments all the time. There are new shapes, new materials. Even the air pulse was so new when it came out, and then air pulse and vibration, and it's incredible how you could just learn so much about your body and different ways of stimulation. Because I think many people in sexuality, once they find one way to have an orgasm, they stick to that way, and they don't experiment with different things. Whereas for me, it was always rabbit vibrators. I just thought that was the only way I could have an orgasm. And then one day my rabbit vibrator broke. And then that for me, I was forced in the nicest possible way to actually explore different things. So, and also now there's lots of toys which have double ends. So it's really nice to create products that are versatile. It's not just one use. You know, I think that's really, really interesting. And one of the most versatile toys you can think of is actually a ring vibrator, a cock ring. It's not just for the base of a penis. You can use it here and have it like that as a clitoral stimulator. You can put it on the guy, this part on the balls, and then give him a blowjob. There's just so many ways, or even on the guy's fingers when you're spooning, or on the base of the penis, and then different ways. So there's like 6 different ways to use this. And that's part of my job, to kind of work out different ways of using each toy. But there are many toys that have different uses as well. Let's say double-ended or things like that. So I think that's the most interesting thing, is to have versatility, and also people like to have gender neutral themes now.
There was a question from Jeff again. Is a blended orgasm a real thing?
Oh, I think so. I mean, there's only one orgasm that's been proven by Masters and Johnson. It's from the clitoris, but I do find personally that when I have dual stimulation, the orgasm does seem to be more intense, but it's not 2 orgasms. It's just 2 points of stimulation. And I do find it more intense, definitely. But having something completely externally like the Satisfyer, you can get something very intense from that. So yeah, it kind of depends on the moment, really. So I think it's a bit of marketing as well, this blended orgasm. I've just read this really incredible book. I don't have it. It's called Becoming Clitorate. And it's all about the clitoris and how it's not getting enough attention. And she says, she calls BS on the blended orgasm. So that's quite interesting. And that's coming from someone who knows a lot about the clitoris.
As personally, I remember a couple of years ago when I was younger, I was always told that you're either clitoris or vaginal, and the more you read about it, but I think it's still something that is quite hidden. You grow up as a young woman with a stereotype of you're either that or the other, and you kind of put yourself in that box, and then you need this kind of education, and if you don't look for it yourself, then you don't really get it.
Definitely. I think I had the same situation. I was reading all these women's magazines and it said clitoral or vaginal. And for me, I was having orgasms from penetration, which is a very rare thing. So I just completely disregarded my clitoris for many years until quite later on in life. And then when I did discover it, I was like, oh my God, I can have orgasms internally, externally, blended, you know, so there are always more than one way. So I was a victim of that as well, just like, but I mean, it's been scientifically proven even before I was reading these magazines that there is one orgasm. So someone's saying, is a 2-in-1 or 3-in-1 better than two separate toys? Well, I think separate toys, you've got to think of how many hands you've got, and not all toys can be used hands-free. So I would go for 2-in-1, definitely. And sometimes 3-in-1, but what the problem there is that you have to think about anatomical differences because not everyone's going to have the same distances between the areas. So you have to have a bit of flexibility in the toy that it's stimulating a range of places.
Hey Venus, this is Jeff again. Are you aware of any data out there that shows overall health benefits of using vibrators? Because my thinking is that some of the stigma associated with them and some of the lack of social media awareness could be overcome by some data out there showing essentially a quality of life benefit, mental health benefit. Is there anything out there that exists that you're aware of, and would that help?
Let me just get this book. Oh yeah, here it is. There's some data in this book, Becoming Clitorate, and it's written by Dr. Laurie Mintz. This is all about the clitoris. There's lots of graphs here. And also it's interesting because I think in terms of benefits, people are focusing more on just the benefit of orgasm, but it's also proven that most women have orgasms more easily with a vibrator than with their hands. So that's something that's to take into consideration. And also only 4% of women have orgasms with penetration alone. But also there's just two kind of concepts here there's a concept called dead vagina. I don't know if you've heard of that. That's when people say that if you use vibration too much, it can kind of kill off nerve endings. There's also some contradictory evidence to that. And she talks about it here, talking about nerves and stimulation. But the kind of takeaway was to use different things at different times and not just do the same thing all the time. Because if you use let's say a wand massager, which has a big head and a big motor, and it's stimulating a very large area, you can feel very numb afterwards. And that's a kind of a weird sensation. Even though you've had a great orgasm, it's like, oh, I can't really feel anything now. And that's not something to go for. So I think definitely vibrators have proven to actually be more efficient at provoking orgasms.
Thank you.
But check this out anyway, because there's lots of great info in here and graphs and studies.
Thanks.
Okay, the price. Well, I'm lucky I don't have to think about the price.
That's not a question. It's I think Manon asked it about clitoral, vaginal, and I just posted the title of a scientific article.
Okay.
Thank you, Rudolph. Maybe we can go back to Randy's question that was just before.
I think the price.
Yeah.
Well, I do. I mean, if sometimes when a sex toy is really good, I also have a pros and cons section in my reviews. So if it's expensive, then I'll say it's expensive as the cons, you know. So So I think for me, I'm fortunate. I don't have to take that. I don't have to worry about that. But I do put myself in the skin of the purchasers and think, oh my God, I would not pay €100 for this. You know what I mean? So that's why I think one of the great things about Satisfyer is because it's very, very affordable. I mean, I know that there is a sex shop down the road selling this for €29. I mean, €29 and rechargeable and super orgasmic. I mean, you can't argue with that. And then you got other companies trying to sell something for €150 and it's not 5 times better. Do you know what I mean? So I think it depends on I mean, how important is packaging? If you're offering a gift to someone, people do like frills in a package, you know, not just I've seen another company give a really kind of no frills packaging, which was literally just a transparent metal bag. And I don't think anyone wants to receive a toy like that. You know, some people want some kind of packaging, but I do think a lot of the costs are going into that and to materials. But also, I wouldn't use a toy that's very cheap. You know, you're thinking the materials, there has to be a margin there. So the materials might not be very good. So I think with Satisfyer, it's volume that makes it okay.
There's a great question here that just popped up.
Okay, what industry development? Well, it'd be great to have more research. I think it would be great if there was more research in sex toys and orgasm. I don't think there is enough research about it. And in terms of industry development, I think people are looking at VR a lot now and making sex toys accessible for everyone. And I think I would like to see voice control personally. And also actually a few years ago, I actually took part in an experiment. I had my orgasm measured in a laboratory, which was really cool. And this was before the Masters of Sex time as well. So I had a mask on and electrodes. I had all these scientists, and it was actually a fantasy of mine. But when it was reality, I was like, oh my God, it's going to be very difficult to have an orgasm like this. But I really concentrated. And I had a battery operated toy as well. So I had to keep putting new batteries in it. It was, but eventually after 25 minutes, I had an orgasm, and it was really, really exciting just to see the graphs, because they were measuring my oxygen, my heartbeat, and something else, I think blood pressure. So those 3 things. And it was very interesting because the graph had like one big peak for all of those things. Whereas for me, experiencing an orgasm would be a case of like, let's say, one big peak and then a few more peaks going down, but it wasn't. It was just like literally one moment of a climax, you know, and then it kind of like went to a bit normal. But it was very interesting to see the kind of before and after, and how calm I was on my heart rate and etc., and my resting heart rate, and how it just proved that, you know, orgasms do relax. Definitely. So there's definitely a kind of beneficial or health side to orgasms that I would like to see that being more visible, really, because we do live in a time where there's not enough orgasm equality, and people talk about the orgasm gap, about comparing female orgasms with male orgasms. But for me, I think the gap is about women's reality and women's potential, because we have way more orgasmic potential and for multi-orgasms as well. And that's the real issue, because, you know, the clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings, the penis has 4,000. So it's just a real waste of orgasmic potential, you know. So that's why my mission is to raise orgasmic awareness. Okay.
I think your title for this is perfect then.
Definitely.
Hey, Venus, Jeff again. Sorry for all the questions, but if no one else is asking, I will. And I'm relatively new to the industry. Again, I come from a med device background. Is toy the right way to describe these products? Because in my mind, it almost cheapens it versus kind of a pleasure or some sort of other label to it. And there will always be the toys, but a lot of these products, there's an amazing amount of technology that goes into it. And I just question, you know, as an industry, can we differentiate toys versus something that's more impactful?
That's very interesting. Because I don't know if you were aware. Can you hear me properly? It sounded like I was under the water. There's a very interesting debate about this that's very recent. There's a company called Get Maude, M-A-U-D-E, and that's, I think it's an American company, and they had some advertising saying, it's not a toy, it's an essential. And they offended a lot of people in the industry who were kind of saying, what's wrong with saying toy? A toy is kind of, well, they were saying that toy was kind of frivolous and it wasn't quite serious, but there's nothing wrong with frivolity or fun. So I think there's a bit of, there are conflicting views on that, because I understand that, I mean, for me as well, explaining what I do to people think, oh, it's just not even serious, or it's not important, where it is, of course, but there is another kind of playful side to it. And also with language on social media, people are using terms such as pleasure products to try and kind of not say the word sex toys. So people are kind of using different language anyway. So you can get away with avoiding the word toy, using pleasure device, pleasure product, something like that. Orgasmic technology, you know, there are ways to
yeah, I think you said earlier that there was a category of personal massagers that maybe the FDA or regular, so that seems like a good descriptive way. And again, I don't know, I'm just trying to learn. But toy, I don't know. It's something for me just doesn't, it cheapens it.
Well, look into that thing about Get Maude, because Get Maude is a company that now Dakota Johnson is part of that. She's the brand ambassador. And everyone's saying, well, she had no problem with 50 Shades, you know, about all the toys there. So, you know, so it's very interesting. But I would just say, I don't really like language policing. I think you can use different words and for different moments and different audiences. So, but look into that debate anyway, because it's quite interesting.
But yeah. Isn't the change of language also on social media more about the censorship and being able to put your product out there rather than trying to make it sound different?
Well, that's what people are accusing them of. They're saying they're just doing that to kind of override the kind of challenges on social media of censorship. Exactly. So there are different opinions about that. Because I mean, but then the danger of that is when you're using more generic terms, is that they might reach audiences that it's not intended for. So that's another issue. Because I mean, another word would be sexual wellness device. You know, that's another term that we can use without pretending it's something that's not. Because it also seems like we're going back to the past when, you know, if you look at advertising in the 50s or before about massages, you know, or about vibrators, and everyone knew they were for the clitoris, but everyone's kind of marketing them like it's for your face or something like that. So it seems like it's kind of going back to that time. And it's interesting because that brand, they did use a kind of, you know, a font that was very 70s and very retro when they were saying this. So it did seem like it was everyone's pretending that it's not for what it is. And it also reminds me of the that scene of Samantha from Sex and the City, you know, when she's in that shop. It's like, oh, you can use it for whatever, you can mount it, you know. So when she's, I think it was the Hitachi wand or something, magic wand. So and also I think when I've seen, I mean, it would be nice, I've never seen a Hitachi magic wand or something like that in a normal shop. That wouldn't be a bad thing, really. So, but these devices are coming into pharmacies now. I've seen pelvic floor trainers in pharmacies, and also there is a product called MyHixel, which is to prevent premature ejaculation, which I think is in pharmacies here in Spain as well. So, and that's a kind of, it's a very nice male masturbator, but so that's good to see that. But you don't want to have it just in pharmacies just because there's something wrong with you. It should be what's wrong with pleasure, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing here in the US, Target and Walmart, two big retailers. You walk down what used to be just the condom aisle, it's everything. It's vibrators, pleasure rings, lubricant. So it's really good to see that it's on retail shelves. And I remember going to Walmart, one of my favorite pictures is all of these products were actually under, you know, behind glass with a lock on it, because there was so many shoplifting of the products that occurred. And it just seemed to me that sends really the wrong message. You know, first of all, people are embarrassed to go buy these things, but then you have to find an associate to come and open up this glass panel to get to the product. I mean, who's going to do that? But yeah, right. But it's just, you know, for it to be in Walmart or Walgreens or Boots shelves is huge, you know, progress, I think, in the industry. And if you go type sexual wellness products under Target.com, it's like what used to be a sex store. It's amazing what's being sold by these, you know, big retailers, which again, I think is encouraging for everybody in the industry.
Oh, I think so too. I mean, I never used to like buying condoms in pharmacies, but now I just buy them in the supermarket and they just, you know, hide them underneath the veggies and it's all fine. But I didn't used to like, I didn't really, I'm foreign in Spain, so I was like, preservativos. I just thought they're going to shout out or something. I just didn't feel comfortable. But it's good to know that you can just buy them and then cover them with your shopping. Not that you should be ashamed of it, but it's good that they're more accessible for sure. And lubricants now and cock rings, and also in the UK, Superdrug is now stocking a lot of sexual wellness products.
Yeah, Boots as well too, and I think it's also for the young people, making it more accessible than it's like sexual protection and things like that, making the accessibility to condoms and protection itself is much better now than it was.
Oh yeah, definitely. Multiple male orgasms are a reality, of course. Yeah, but it's maybe not as it is, of course. Because if you read Mantak Chia, he's got a book called The Multi-Orgasmic Man, which is really good. And there's a multi-orgasmic woman as well. This is really cool if you want to indulge in sacred sexuality and upgrade your orgasm, which is something I'm really interested in at the moment. And then what else? Is there a future for non-battery operated toys? Well, I don't know. I mean, like dildos, something like that with no motor. I think there is a market for that. There's definitely a market for that. So I'm not really interested in them too much personally. But I mean, there's definitely a market for it. And also for toys for tickling and different things and just like caressing different parts of your body. It's not all about genital stimulation. That's something that's quite nice with dildos. It's not just about genitals. I mean, if it's a glass dildo or a steel, that's another material I didn't mention earlier, some kind of metal, you can put it in like a cold glass of water and then put it on your back or something. And you can do lots of things like that where it's not just about genitals, and you can insert it if you want and you know it's a very clean surface. Clothes, everything can be a toy really. I mean, even your phone, you know, there was an app years ago called iVibrate, and it would make your phone just vibrate for 15 minutes. Obviously phones are very dirty, so even when but maybe through your underwear that could be a thing. But yeah, anything can be a toy. Even a piece of paper, you can just rip off a piece of paper and use it to tickle someone. I mean, that's a great toy. You know, just demonstrate something like that. You know, if you like blindfold someone, and also if you're into tickling, a hairbrush can be really intense on the sole of someone's foot. So there's many different things you can use as potential toys.
I think we've reached the end. Maybe if last questions are coming through, then we're gonna maybe finish the session. I don't know. Anyone else? This is your last chance. No. Yes. Are your expectation, what does the industry need?
Nice to have some more safety. Definitely.
Yeah.
That would be nice. Yes, I think that's the most important thing, really. I think things are getting better because now materials are improving a lot. They have improved a lot. And really long-lasting batteries would be great. And also to improve the silence factor. I think there are some motors which are good in terms of, let's say, strength versus noise, which is something I do look at in my reviews as well. Because if you're with another person or if you live with people, you don't want to have this really loud toy. It can make you feel really paranoid when you're using it. So I think going for silent but strong should be an objective, and improving safety. Yeah, I think that's it really. And then the VR thing is becoming quite popular, and then voice control.
Yeah, you sound very excited about this one. You mentioned it a couple of times.
They're going now.
Yeah. Okay, should we wrap up today's event? Thank you again, Venus. That was a great masterclass. It was very, we learned a lot. It was great. Thank you for participating too yesterday for the quick chat with Thomas. We were happy to have you, and everyone else. Thank you very much for taking part today and in the other days if you were here too. I want to thank all the partners, all the speakers, the Wear It Berlin team for organizing the event, and Reframe for being part of it too with Sense yesterday. Feel free to contact us or to connect with us on social media, and have a good evening. Thank you very much.